Welcome to our deep dive, into the invisible landscape.
By Terence and Dennis McKenna.
Right, by Terence and Dennis McKenna.
It's a wild ride.
It is a wild
We're
ride.
talking Amazon, hallucinogenic mushrooms, and the quest to understand consciousness.
Yeah, and the book is this fascinating blend of, personal narrative, scientific inquiry, and philosophical exploration,
Yeah.
and really the limits of our understanding.
I'm really curious to kind of unpack the core ideas and see where they take us.
Well, and what's so intriguing is that their journey starts with a very tangible, real-world experience, right? An expedition to the Amazon rainforest in search of this specific plant with psychoactive properties.
But as often happens with expeditions into the unknown, they kind of stumbled upon something even more potent, which is the Stropharia cubensis mushroom. It triggered this cascade of just profound reality-shifting experiences that challenged their existing worldview and then set them on this path to understand, what is consciousness and what is the potential of these magical dimensions.
So it's like they accidentally unlocked a door to a different reality
Yeah,
and then spent years trying to map the territory.
exactly.
So what were some of the key insights that they gleaned from these experiences?
Well, one of the central themes that emerges is this idea of liberation.
Okay.
Humanity's, age-old quest for freedom from suffering and limitations. And the McKennas propose that exploring these altered states of consciousness, perhaps through psychedelics, could be the next step in this journey of liberation.
That's where their fascination with shamanism comes in, right?
Exactly.
Particularly the use of psychotropic substances to access alternate realities and connect with the spirit world.
Yes. They were drawn to this role of the shaman as a healer and what's called a psychopomp, who can navigate these non-ordinary realms and guide others through them. And they saw a parallel between the shamanic initiation and the stages of schizophrenia, suggesting that the shaman is a healed madman.
Wow.
Who has integrated both ordinary and non-ordinary reality.
So that's a thought-provoking concept.
It is.
The idea that navigating the depths of altered reality could lead to a deeper understanding of both worlds.
Right.
But their exploration didn't stop at ancient tradition.
They also launched a pretty strong critique of scientific materialism.
Okay, so they weren't saying that science is wrong, but rather that it's incomplete.
Exactly.
That it needs to expand its framework to encompass these more subtle aspects of reality.
Precisely. And they went even further, proposing that mind is not merely a product of matter, but an inherent aspect of even the simplest organisms. It's a bold proposition that consciousness is woven into the fabric of the universe itself.
Yeah, which leads us to one of their most intriguing ideas.
Yes.
The concept of a holographic universe.
The holographic universe.
It's a bit mind-bending, but I'm curious to hear how they apply it to understanding consciousness.
Well, the idea is that the brain might function like a hologram, storing information not in specific locations, but distributed across the entire network.
So instead of thinking of the brain as a computer with files stored in specific folders,
Right.
they're suggesting it's more like a vast interconnected web of information,
Exactly.
where every point contains the potential of the whole.
Exactly. And they take this concept even further, speculating that the entire universe might operate on holographic principles.
Right.
Imagine a universe where every point contains information about every other point, a kind of cosmic interconnectedness that goes beyond our current understanding of space and time.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
It definitely challenges our everyday perception of reality. But how do hallucinogens, specifically the ones they experimented with, fit into this picture? I mean, were they just a means to have a cool experience, or did they play a more fundamental role in their exploration?
Well, the McKennas believe that these substances weren't just about altering perception.
Yeah.
They were tools for exploring the very building blocks of life,
Okay.
DNA and RNA.
Interesting.
They hypothesized that hallucinogens could be interacting with these molecules, influencing consciousness by modulating electromagnetic signals at a fundamental level.
So they saw these substances as a way to potentially tweak the underlying code of our biology and access deeper levels of information within ourselves.
That was their proposition. They suggested that these substances could alter perception memory and even the structure of the genetic code itself, raising fascinating questions about the relationship between chemistry, consciousness, and the evolution of the mind.
Now, one of the most surprising connections they made is between their psychedelic explorations and the I Ching, that ancient Chinese text of divination.
Yes.
I'm really curious to hear how they linked these seemingly disparate realms.
It's a testament to their intellectual curiosity and their willingness to synthesize seemingly unrelated fields. They saw a surprising connection between their experiences and the sequence of hexagrams in the I Ching, particularly the King Wen sequence.
And what exactly did they find in this ancient system? What insights did it offer to their exploration of consciousness and reality?
Not just as a divination tool, but as a possible roadmap of time itself.
I'm intrigued by this connection. How did they even begin to see a link between their psychedelic experiences and this ancient Chinese text?
Well, it all started with the King Wen sequence, a specific arrangement of the 64 hexagrams in the I Ching. They noticed that this sequence could be interpreted as representing a 384-day lunar calendar, possibly used in ancient China.
A lunar calendar hidden within the I Ching. Did they find any historical evidence to support this idea?
They acknowledged that this calendar seems to have been lost to history, possibly due to cultural shifts and changes in power. However, they found the 384-day cycle particularly interesting because it resonated with their own experiences.
You mean the duration of their intense psychedelic experience in the Amazon, which they said lasted roughly 384 days? That does seem like an incredible coincidence.
It's certainly thought-provoking. They proposed that the I Ching, especially when viewed through the lens of their psychedelic experience, offered a glimpse into a deeper level of reality where time operates differently.
So they're not just talking about predicting specific events, but understanding the underlying patterns of time itself. What kind of patterns did they see?
They saw a hierarchy of time with larger cycles encompassing smaller cycles, all nested within each other, much like the structure of the I Ching itself. They believe this structure reflects the ebb and flow of novelty and habit in the universe.
Novelty and habit. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. They observed that the universe seems to go through periods of intense creativity and change, followed by periods of consolidation and stability. They saw this reflected in everything from the evolution of life to the rise and fall of civilizations.
That's a fascinating perspective. Did they suggest any way to map or predict these cycles of novelty and habit?
Well, they identified specific numerical patterns within the sequence and used those patterns to generate a graphical representation of how novelty changes over time.
And what does this time wave zero model tell us? Can it actually predict the future?
They emphasize that it's not about deterministic predictions. It's more like a weather forecast for the fabric of reality itself. It shows how novelty fluctuates in a wave-like pattern, with peaks representing periods of high novelty and troughs representing periods of low novelty.
So periods of rapid change and innovation would be peaks in the wave, while periods of stability and consolidation would be the troughs. Did they offer any examples of how this model aligns with historical events?
They pointed to the rise of agriculture, the development of writing, and the scientific revolution as examples of peaks in novelty. They also saw the rapid pace of change in the 20th century as reflecting our proximity to a major turning point in the wave.
Which brings us to their much-discussed prediction about 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. Were they predicting the end of the world as we know it?
Not in a literal sense. They viewed 2012 as a point of maximum novelty, a culmination of the current cycle of time. They speculated that this could lead to a profound shift in consciousness, perhaps a transcendence of our current limitations.
So not an apocalypse, but maybe an evolutionary leap forward. It sounds like they believed understanding these patterns of time could help us navigate this transition.
That was their hope. They believed the I Ching, combined with their insights from psychedelic experiences, could offer a guide to understanding the dynamic nature of reality. But to really test their hypotheses, they needed to go beyond theory and observation. They needed to experiment.
And that's where their experiment at La Chorrera comes in.
Yeah. Their experiment at La Chorrera was their attempt to directly interact with the invisible landscape, to push the boundaries of consciousness and explore uncharted territories of the mind.
So we've traced the McKenna's journey from the Amazon rainforest to the depths of the I Ching. And now we arrive at La Chorrera, the site of their audacious experiment. What were they hoping to achieve with this experiment?
What was their attempt to directly test some of their hypotheses about consciousness time and the potential of specific hallucinogens to unlock deeper levels of understanding. They chose La Chorrera, a remote location in the Amazon, to create a controlled environment where they could really immerse themselves in this exploration. They focused on two types of hallucinogens, tryptamines and beta-carbolines. Tryptamines, like psilocybin found in the mushrooms they encountered earlier, were believed to interact primarily with RNA.
Okay, a quick biology refresher for our listeners. RNA is like the messenger molecule that carries instructions from DNA to the protein-building machinery in our cells. So how did tryptamines fit into their experiment?
They hypothesized that tryptamines could open up channels in the neural membrane, allowing for a more intense flow of information and a heightened state of awareness. Think of it like turning up the volume on the signals within the brain.
Interesting. And what about beta-carbolines? What role did they play?
Beta-carbolines, particularly harmine found in the ayahuasca vine, were believed to interact primarily with DNA, the molecule that holds our genetic blueprint. The McKennas theorized that harmine could enable a kind of readout of the information stored within DNA, making it accessible to consciousness.
Hold on. They thought harmine could allow us to tap into the vast library of information encoded in our DNA. That sounds like something out of a science fiction novel.
It's certainly a bold idea. They envisioned the DNA harmine complex as a sort of holographic information storage system holding the entirety of our genetic and experiential memory, and the tryptamines, by interacting with RNA, would act like a switch, activating this readout mechanism.
So it's like they were trying to create a symphony of consciousness using tryptamines to amplify the signals and harmine to access the deeper code within our DNA. What kind of experiences did they report having during this experiment?
Their accounts, as you might expect, are quite extraordinary. They describe profound alterations in perception, intense emotional states, and a sense of transcending the boundaries of ordinary reality. They reported encountering entities, receiving insights into the nature of time and the universe, and even experiencing a phenomenon they called speech becoming visible.
Speech becoming visible. I'm having trouble even picturing that. Can you elaborate?
They described seeing sound waves, especially vocalized sounds, manifest as visual patterns in even three-dimensional forms. Imagine the boundary between sound and sight dissolving, creating a synesthetic experience where words take on visual form.
Wow, that's truly mind-bending. It challenges our very understanding of how our senses work. Did they offer any explanation for this phenomenon?
They speculated that it could be related to the way hallucinogens might alter the electromagnetic fields within the brain, creating a kind of interference pattern that allows sound to be perceived visually.
It's as if their brains became a synesthetic synthesizer, blending sensory input in ways we can barely imagine. It's clear this experiment went far beyond just having a psychedelic experience. They were grappling with fundamental questions about consciousness and reality. What insights did they glean from these profound experiences?
Their reflections are just as fascinating as the experiences themselves. They saw connections between their psychedelic insights, shamanic traditions, and even cutting-edge theories in physics and biology. They began to question the limitations of a purely materialistic worldview and explore alternative models of consciousness in the universe.
So their journey into the invisible landscape of the mind led them to question the very nature of the visible world. What do you think is the lasting legacy of the McKenna's work? What can we take away from their exploration?
Well, they offer a powerful reminder that there's more to reality than what we can see and measure. They encourage us to question our assumptions, explore the uncharted territories of consciousness, and embrace the mysteries of the universe. Their work is a call to expand our understanding of what's possible both within ourselves and in the cosmos.
It's an invitation to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep wondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible landscape. Perhaps the most important takeaway is that the invisible might be closer than we think, waiting to be discovered within the depths of our own consciousness.